Hi, it's Jill Osborne from the ICN Network, and I'm here in the ICN office. And I'd like to give you another great self-help tip on living with IC, this time on the IC diet. Why? Because we now know that diet modification is absolutely vital for the vast majority of patients. Now, why do I say that? Well, number one, we've known that for 20 to 25 years. You spend any time at all with IC patients, they will very quickly tell you that certain foods make their bladder symptoms much, much worse. But luckily, Long Island University confirmed that with two very good research studies, including one published in the spring of 2009, which showed that the vast majority of IC patients absolutely had negative reactions to certain foods. Not only was it IC patients, but we also now know that men with prostatitis can also be very sensitive to certain foods. So the question then is, what are those foods? Well, we have a couple of easy rules of thumb. And I think one really easy way to think about this is if you had a cut on your hand, what would make that worse? Well, number one, acid. If you poured lemon juice on an open wound, it's going to hurt badly. Okay, thus, foods that are high in acid are foods that we're going to want to avoid. If you poured alcohol on a wound, like Bactine, hello, it stings. Thus, we're going to probably stay away from alcohol for not the long term, but definitely the short term. What's one of the earliest forms of torture? Rubbing salt into an open wound. Thus, foods that are high in salt can be very irritating. And then last but not least is caffeine. You know, caffeine is very neurostimulatory. It turns nerves on. And that's exactly what we don't want to happen in the bladder. You know, when you have IC and prostatitis, you've got frequency, urgency, pressure, pain. Those are nerves that are working improperly. The last thing we want to do is stimulate those nerves to give you more frequency, urgency, pressure, or pain. Thus, we're also going to avoid foods that are high in caffeine. So let me take a moment and review our top forbidden foods. Now, these are the foods that we believe the vast majority of patients need to avoid for at least 3 months, maybe 6 months, maybe a little bit longer, but there are some workarounds. So let me share them with you. The number one forbidden food is a no-brainer. It's coffee. Why? Well, because coffee is very high in acid and it's very high in caffeine. And just be really logical about it. I mean, if you had an open wound on your hand, would you pour coffee on it? And the answer is, of course, no. So don't pour coffee on a wounded, tender bladder. And I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, when somebody calls my office crying in pain, they eventually admit that they're still drinking that cup of coffee in the morning. And you know who you are. I can think of several people right now who for at least a year kept telling me that they were not drinking coffee, and they finally fessed up and said they were, and they were in pretty bad shape. So coffee is to be avoided for at least 3 months, if not 6 months, to really give your bladder a shot at calming down. So the question then is, what can you do? Well, number one, you can try an herbal coffee. I mean, wait a couple of weeks, wait for your bladder to really have a chance to rest a bit. And then when you're ready to try something hot like that again, we want you to try an herbal coffee like Pero, Cafix, Caffrey Roma, or another option here is Roast Aroma by Celestial Seasonings. These are all good examples of herbal coffees, and they're surprisingly good. If you do well with the herbal coffees, the next thing that you can try is a real low acid coffee, such as a coffee made by Euromild or a coffee made by Pure Roast. The next forbidden food is tea. Earl Grey tea, any of those conventional caffeine-based teas are out. Why? Because like coffee, they're very high in acid and very high in caffeine. And yes, that means sweet tea, iced tea, also made from those teas, are out for you. What you need to do is have lower in acid teas, like a plain herbal peppermint tea, a plain herbal chamomile tea, or you can also try the Celestial Seasonings roasted carob teas. They make some very good ones. Here's an example of a roasted carob English toffee tea. And of course, if you're having any symptoms at all and you need something hot or cold to drink, just stick with the hot water with sugar, hot water with honey, or you can do hot milk. Those are always going to be IC friendly. The next forbidden food is soda. This is very predictable. Think about it. Would you pour something high in artificial flavorings, high in artificial colorings, high in preservatives, and high in acid on a wound? Of course not. I mean, think about it. If soda can take the rust off of a penny, what's it going to do to a wound in the bladder? It's going to be profoundly irritating. I am personally of the opinion that you're a fool if you're drinking soda when you have IC. Now, if there is one soda that you might be able to get away with, it's going to be a simple, old-fashioned root beer. Why? Because it's lower in acid and caffeine-free, but you cannot do it every day. You're going to have to do it as a special treat maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks. The next forbidden food is fruit juice. Why? Because fruit juices contain concentrated acid. If you look at bottles of fruit juice, you will almost always see citric acid added for flavoring. And so the juices we really want you to stay away from obviously are going to be orange juice, grapefruit juice, lemonade, limeade, tomato juice, any of those which are profoundly acidic. But you might be able to get away with a pear juice or a baby apple juice. Why baby juices? Because they are naturally lower in acid because the manufacturers do not add a lot of extra flavoring to them. So if you're looking for juices, think pear, blueberry, apple, and if, just to be on the safe side, try to dilute them 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. That's what I do when I have a juice. The next forbidden food is artificial sugar, particularly sugars based on saccharin or aspartame. Why? Because when they're metabolized in your body, they become very powerful acids. Thus, if you're going to use a sugar, use sugar, use honey. It's the artificial sugars that are really well known to create, in some cases, very significant bladder irritation. The last forbidden food is going to surprise some of you. It's vitamins, vitamin C and vitamin B6. Why? Well, number one, patients have frequently reported that they irritate their bladder. But number two, it's logical. What is vitamin C but ascorbic acid? It can be irritating to the bladder, especially for people who take a lot of vitamins every day. There are some good low acid vitamin alternatives, specifically for vitamin C. There's a low acid ester C that might be worth trying, but for some people, even this is too irritating for their bladders. And what makes it really tricky are all of the multivitamins out there. There are a lot of vitamin companies who are hoping that you believe them when they say you have to take a vitamin to be healthy. And yet quite a few doctors disagree with that. They actually think it's a bit of a scam. But regardless of what that is, what I know in my experience is that when I take a traditional multivitamin, it irritates my bladder badly. But I can occasionally get away, maybe every other couple of days, with a children's multivitamin. Now, if you have a medical condition that requires you to take extra vitamins, or if you're pregnant and you need to take prenatal vitamins, you're not going to have a choice. You're going to have to take the vitamins. But talk with your doctor about it and see if there are some other options instead.